Alright, hello Guild Wars 2 gamers, Mukluk here, and today is it's technically March 21st. It is Saturday, although these notes came out yesterday. My voice has been on the fritz, but I'm breaking my vow of silence to go over these notes, and then I'm going back into the mute bin. So, what are these? Guild Wars 2 has released a massive set of patch notes, which I have taken a lot of time to go through and highlight stuff. Red is a nerf, green is a buff, yellow is a rework. And you can see there's a lot of red on these. Now, what are they doing? The TLDR is nerfs. It's a lot of nerfs. The game has had power creep for a very long time, and it does need nerfs. Now, I will agree that this needs to happen. I do not know if this is the right way of doing it or not. I'm sure we'll hear a lot of, like, I know Ranger really well, right? There are people out there that know Guardian like the back of their hand, or Mesmer, stuff like that, and I will be waiting to hear what they have to say about this. But essentially, for those that do not know, maybe you're newer to the game, back in Heart of Thorns, you could clear all the raids if everyone in the squad was doing like 10k DPS. If you're doing 20, easy, okay? Now, these days, you've got people doing 30, 40, sometimes 50. You know, they're like, you don't see those much, but they are there. So it is absolutely insane. Like, we are skipping entire phases on some bosses. However, there's a problem. You can't just fix the situation across the board by simply nerfing everybody's damage, because you also have some fights that they've designed after all this other stuff happened, right? Also, Rook, thank you for the raid. I appreciate that. You've got fights like Legendary Challenge Mode Ceres, you know, Legendary Harvest Temple, stuff like that. And these fights cannot be done without people doing like the top of the line performance right now. So if they nerf stuff to make it to where the old content is no longer like having skippable phases and it feels the way it's supposed to feel, some of the new stuff will be literally impossible. Like, this is not so, like, and of course if you buff things, then the old stuff is an absolute joke. So there's going to have to be some reworks. Like, in my opinion, I think the answer is to do some nerfs across the board, and then also then keep a close eye on some of the stuff like, you know, Ceres and Greer, and see if there's any things that need to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. But let's see what they're doing right now. So, greetings, Tyrians. Welcome to the preview for the April 14th balance update. Over the past few expansions, player damage in PvE has slowly increased as we adjusted builds to be competitive with newer features. Our objective for this update is to reduce overall damage done by players in PvE while keeping builds at a comparable power level to one another. The goal of these reductions is to bring player damage to a place that better matches the expectations and preserves the mechanical integrity of our older open world and instanced encounters. As such, this update is largely focused on number tuning with minimal functional changes. Players can expect a 10 to 15% damage reduction in most damage-oriented builds. We do not expect these changes to have a noticeable impact on casual PvE gameplay, and players will be able to continue playing the builds they enjoy. We'll keep a close eye on how these changes impact some of the most challenging PvE encounters, and we'll follow up with adjustments to those if necessary. So far, this is awesome. So far, I'm happy with this. Like, honestly, if this is probably not even enough, but if they do this and they manage to, like, if this is their goal, I think that's admirable. Whether or not they're pulling it off with these changes, I don't know. As always, the goal of previewing these changes is to gather your feedback before the live release. We'll be following the conversation and making further adjustments as needed, thanks the Skills and Balance team. Now, as I mentioned, my voice has a timer today, so you're going to get a more get-to-the-point version of patch notes than you ever did before. Alright? Once again, red is a nerf, green is a buff, yellow is a rework. So we will be skimming. Alright, general changes. Relic of the Steam Shrieker is getting minor nerf. Relic of the Fog now has an 8-second internal cooldown in PvP and World v World. Focusing on Elementalist. Outside of the PvE-focused reductions of all professions are seeing, Ellie is receiving a couple of functionality changes. Crashing Font is being changed to always heal the user with a healing increase upon striking a foe instead of all or nothing. This increases the consistency of Hammer's healing while still rewarding offensive use. Stoneheart is being reworked to now provide a large damage reduction instead of critical strike immunity. This change gives the trait more relevancy in PvE builds that benefit from a defensive trait while also giving us better control over the effectiveness of the trait in competitive modes. Pyromancer's Training, Storm Soul, Piercing Shards, and Inferno are all getting small damage nerfs in PvE. Raging Ricochet no longer grants a bonus to outgoing condition damage when consuming a fire bullet. Instead, grants might to the user when consuming a fire bullet. Hurricane of Pain is getting a PvE damage nerf. Flame Spear, Blazing Barrage, Meteor, and Lightning Javelin are getting buffs to their damage in PvE. Stoneheart and Crashing Font are getting reworks, which I just described. Tempest is getting the Transcendent Tempest trait slightly nerfed in PvE. Fracturing Strike is getting a small nerf in PvE. Weaver's Prowess no longer grants a bonus to outgoing condition damage. Swift Revenge and Elements of Rage for Weaver are getting slight nerfs in PvE. Catalyst Empowering Auras are getting a slight nerf in PvE. Same with Spectacular Sphere. Sphere Specialist reduces the bonus boon duration from 100% to 50 in PvE. That means if you're using this for boons, you're going to want to check to see if you have enough concentration in your build. You might have to move some stuff. Elemental Synergy, increase the base healing by 50% and increase the endurance gain slightly in PvP and World v World. Evoker changes. Familiar's Focus is getting slightly nerfed in PvE. Familiar's Blessing getting slightly nerfed on the quickness uptime in PvE. Once again, you might have to check to see if you have enough concentration. Specialized Elements increase the empowered skill recharge reduction from 20% to 50 in PvE. Engineer. Engineer's PvE changes are targeted at reducing the effectiveness of condition damage from core weapon and utility skills. In competitive modes, explosive entrance damage will be reduced, while Corona Burst damage profile is being shifted. Currently, some engineer builds can rely too heavily on explosive entrance to deal damage, and it can be hard to mitigate and feel uninteractive. By lowering explosive entrance and making small adjustments to weapons, we hope to encourage other playstyles for engineer, and will be monitoring the need for further adjustments. Let me mute this. Okay. Corona Burst is another important damage skill for Hollowsmith, and due to the skill delivering 2 strikes, it can also feel hard to mitigate. In competitive modes, we're backloading the damage so that the second strike will be more important to react to. This allows enemies to have clearer windows of damage mitigation, but it also gives Hollowsmith players stronger moments to deal burst damage. Glass Cannon slightly nerfed in PvE. Conduit Surge reduced the burning stacks, increased the focused burning duration, and increased the unfocused burning duration in PvE. So I highlighted this in yellow because the first part's a nerf, but the second part's a buff. I don't know if that's a net gain or a net loss. Electric Artillery and Blowtorch are both getting nerfs in PvE. Radiant Arc, Rocket Charge, and Shock Shield are getting buffs, or in the case of the second two, cooldown reductions in PvP and World v World. Shrapnel Grenade is getting a PvE nerf. Flame Blast is reducing the burning stacks, but increasing the burning duration in PvE. Stoke the Flames, Napalm, and Explosive Entrance are all getting small nerfs. Stoke in PvE, Napalm in PvE, Explosive Entrance in competitive modes. Hollowsmith, the Corona Burst thing that was mentioned earlier, increased the burning duration in PvE only, but reduced the initial power coefficient in PvP and World v World dramatically. The delayed power coefficient was then increased in PvP and World v World. So in competitive, the first hit of Corona Burst is going to be lesser, but the second hit is going to be greater so that people have more time to dodge it. Photon Blitz increased the burning duration slightly in PvE. Amalgam Only Change New Genes reduced alacrity duration from 6 seconds to 4. Once again, you're going to want to check to see if you have enough concentration if you're providing this boon. Guardian. Outside of the global damage reduction changes, Guardian's adjustments are focused on the Luminary's elite specialization. Luminary has been performing exceptionally in all game modes, a bit too exceptionally. In PvE, many of Luminary's healing abilities are seeing reductions to their base values along with increases to their healing power scaling. This is targeted to reduce the healing output from damage-oriented Luminaries while affecting healing-oriented Luminaries less. In competitive modes, many of Luminary's cooldowns are being increased. This will encourage more thoughtful use of their skills and increase the window of time in which they can be punished for improper cooldown management. You'll notice there's a lot of red here. So, for Base Guardian, Whirling Wrath, Helio Rush, True Shot, Purging Flames, Peacekeeper, Unscathed Contender, Inspire Virtue, and Furious Focus are all being slightly nerfed in PvE. That's player versus environment. For Dragon Hunter specifically, Shield of Courage is getting 15 more seconds on its cooldown in World v World. Zealot's Aggression and Big Game Hunter are getting damage nerfs in PvE. Firebrand, Chapter 4 Scorched Aftermath, and Epilogue Ashes of the Just are both getting PvE nerfs. Willbender, Rushing Justice, and Tyrant's Momentum are getting small PvE nerfs. Also, I want to reiterate once again, because I know I'm glossing over stuff more than usual, if you want to pause and read any of this, or if you want the full patch notes, I always include a link to them underneath the video. So make sure to go there if you want to read any of this yourself. All right, so Luminary. Radiant Justice, Radiant Resolve, Radiant Courage are getting nerfed in competitive modes. Their cooldowns are all getting increased. Dazzling Hammer is getting reduced damage in PvE and increased cooldown in competitives. Shining Spin, reduce damage in PvE. Glaring Burst, reduced damage in PvE with Hammer. Luminous Staff, reduce power coefficient in PvE, increase cooldown by 5 seconds in World v World. Gleaming Blade, reduce power coefficient slightly in PvE. Lucent Thrust, reduce power coefficient of the initial strike in PvE, reduce power coefficient of the projectile in PvE. Radiant Bulwark, increase the cooldown by 5 seconds in competitives. And then we got a few reworks here. Daring Advance updated the description and skills facts to clarify that tethered opponents are revealed and take increased damage from the caster. Effulgent Stance and Sovereign of Light, to summarize, their base healing is getting dumpstered, but their healing power coefficient is getting boosted a ton. What does that mean? That means a healing Luminary will possibly be healing more than before, or the same as before with these skills. But a Luminary that's not healing focused is going to get less out of them now, because they were too strong for non-healers. Okay, Mesmer. Mesmer is seeing similar skill and trait reductions to other professions, and one we'd like to expound on is a Mirror Blade. Mirror Blade bounces in a unique way compared to similar skills like Winds of Chaos. After the first hit, Mirror Blade can subsequently bounce to either enemies or allies as determined by proximity and some prioritizations, such as to players and enemies. We like the way Mirror Blade currently functions, and we believe it's important that its functionality remains as is for competitive modes. However, we also recognize that this functionality makes it hard to expect a consistent output from the skill in PvE. By both increasing the base power coefficient and damage reduction per bounce, the damage will become front-loaded and more predictable in PvE. In competitive modes, we've seen the usage of the Domination specialization fall off after the Power Block rework. We're adjusting it and Greatsword to increase their synergy with one another and encourage using both. Troubadour is a powerful force in World v World recently, so it's receiving cooldown increases to lower its overall output. So, once again, Mirror Blade is an attack that hits an enemy and then bounces around, but they want to make it reliable, so they're making it do more damage on the first opening hit. So, increase the power coefficient by double, and increase the damage reduction per bounce from 15% to 80% in PvE. So, to be clear, you're losing 80% damage per bounce, not losing 15%. So, way more damage at first, less damage bouncing. Mind the Gap, Blade Call, Compounding Power, and Chaotic Persistence are all getting some nerfs in PvE. Mind Stab will now do increased damage against Vuln foes. Illusionary Wave reduced the cooldown by 5 seconds and now inflicts Vuln. Dazzling trait now triggers on any disable instead of just dazes and stuns. Power Block increased the damage increase from 10 to 15% in competitive modes. Chronomancer, Danger Time, and Chrono Phantasma are getting PvE nerfs. Mirage, Nomad's Endurance, Imaginary Axes, and Phantom Razor are getting PvE nerfs. Virtuoso, Deadly Blades is getting a PvE buff to its condition damage. For Troubadour, Lively Loot, Crescendo, Tale of the Honorable Rogue, and Tale of the August Queen are all getting nerfs in various ways in World v. World. The first three, they're getting longer cooldowns, and the last one is getting reduced distortion duration. Necromancer. Necromancer changes. Much like Luminary, the base healing of Ritualist healing skills are being reduced, while healing power coefficients are being increased. This doesn't really surprise me. Teapot did a fantastic video of this awesome Rit build pretty early on. It was Zealot build Ritualist that was able to almost do as much healing as a heal Rit while doing almost as much damage as a DPS. Very fun build. In my opinion, it's not really healthy for the game because it's like, why would you ever bring a Paragon who does 100 DPS while healing when you could bring a Ritualist that does 15k while healing? You know, it's like, we could just bring another DPS. So while it's a fun build, I don't think it's good for the game. This seems to be tackling situations like that. This is to reduce the healing output of damage-oriented Writs while affecting the healing-oriented Writs less. Necromancers have been performing very well in World v. World after these Spite spec adjustments. Writs in particular have proved to be strong, so they're receiving adjustments to lower their spike damage. Weakening Shroud is being decoupled from enfeebling Blood so that it can regain its old functionality of corrupting a boon. Reaper will get access to better damage mitigation tools as Cold Shoulder regains some old functionality as well, and Infusing Terror no longer has to sacrifice its damage reduction to be reactivated. So, Spiteful Talisman is getting a damage nerf in PvE. Spiteful Spirit is reducing the number of boons removed in World v. World. Weakening Shroud, the ability used when entering Shroud has been renamed Weakening Shroud and now corrupts a boon in addition to previous effects. Death Perception, reduced critical damage increase slightly in PvE. And then, probably the most green on this whole document, Reaper, Executioner's Scythe, increased power coefficient in PvE, Soul Eater buffed in PvE, Shivers of Dread now increases chill duration, Cold Shoulder now no longer increases chill duration and now reduces incoming strike damage from chilled enemies. Infusing Terror, reactivating the skill to cast Terrify, no longer removes the damage reduction effect. So for those who've never played Reaper, one of their Shroud buttons, they hit the button and it will give them like a shield, but if they hit it again, it spins the shield and does like a CC. Now they no longer have to spend it. They just can hit it again for the CC one time, but they don't lose the shield. Harbinger, Dark Gunslinger is getting a small nerf in PvE. Doom Approaches is getting a small nerf in PvE. Ritualist, Essence Blast is going to do less damage in PvE. Wanderlust, Splinter Weapon, and Explosive Growth are getting... Wanderlust and Splinter Weapon are getting World v. World nerfs. Explosive Growth is getting a PvE nerf. Empowering Spirits is getting more quickness duration on it, which might make the amount of concentration needed for such a build lessened. Nightmare Weapon, reduce the base healing... hold on, let's just summarize this. Nightmare Weapon, Resilient Weapon, and Preservation are getting the Luminary treatment. If, the base healing is going down, but the ratio of how much healing they get from healing power is going up. That means if you are playing a healing-focused Ritualist, you will see little to no change from this. But if you are playing a Ritualist focused on doing damage and you're just using these skills, they will heal less than before. Ranger. Outside of PvE reductions, Ranger's updates will reduce its effectiveness in large-scale World v. World. Both Druid and Untamed have been dominant forces recently, and while we are happy to see Ranger's use in these settings, it has proven to be a bit stifling. Druid's strongest tool, Spirit of Nature... Spirit of Nature is a core Ranger skill, not a Druid one? So, okay. Will have its number of targets reduced, and Untamed is getting some of its damage modifiers reduced. Additionally, we're increasing the cooldown for swapping defeated pets to see if we can find a happy medium for it. So, Predator's Onslaught, Hunter's Tactics, Hidden Barbs, and Beastly Warden are getting PvE nerfs. I want to talk about Beastly Warden for a second. Beastly Warden is the trait that gives bear and pig pets double damage. Now keep in mind, a bear and a pig pets are not even DPS pets. They're kind of like tanky ones, but doubling the damage makes them kind of DPS pets. 67% more damage is still substantial, but it will be lessened. One of the most popular quickness untamed builds right now uses the Wallow as a pet, and they use this trait. I would guess that they're going to lose a few hundred to 1 to 2k DPS just because of this change right here. Now, any build that uses that is still going to be fine. It's probably still going to use the same trait, but damage decrease there, obviously. Okay, Spirit of Nature in World v World only will only revive 2 targets. Increase the cooldown of swapping a defeated pet from 25 seconds to 35 in World v World. Keep in mind, it was recently, like, for years and years and years, it was like 45 seconds to a minute, and they just recently buffed it, making it shorter, and now they're nerfing it back down a little bit. So it's not going back to what it was, but it is going down in World v World only. Druid Natural Balance is getting a condition damage nerf in PvE. Soul Beast, twice as vicious, reduce the strike damage bonus in PvE. Untamed, Blinding Outburst, and Vow of the Untamed are getting damage nerfs in World v World. Drink of water. Okay, hey, 69 viewers on YouTube. Nice. Revenant. Along with some PvE damage reductions, Revenant is receiving some small adjustments in competitive modes. In World v World, we have seen Revenant getting used less than other damage options. We don't believe it has to be too far off, and so Brutality and Hammer damage are being increased to make them more appealing options. In PvP, Vindicator's Legendary Alliance stance is getting attention so that it can hopefully see more usage. Abyssal Raise, Abyssal Strike, and Abyssal Fire are getting PvE nerfs. Echoing Eruption, Embrace the Darkness, and Overworldly Bond are getting PvE nerfs. Coalescence of Ruin is getting a shorter cooldown in World v World. Phase Smash is getting more damage in World v World. Phantom's Onslaught is getting reduced cooldown in competitive modes. Brutality is getting increased damage in World v World only. Conduit, Release Potential Assassin, Beguiling Haze, and Twin Moon Sweep are getting PvE nerfs. Vindicator, Forerunner of Death, is getting a PvE power nerf. But Empire Divided is getting a decent PvP power buff. Nomad's Advanced is getting a PvP... Oh, you know what? This is increased. This should be green. Nomad's Advance is getting a PvP power buff. Battle Dance is getting 2 seconds reduced cooldown in PvP only. Reaver's Rage and Awakening are getting reduced energy costs in PvP only. Did they fix the Sikkim bug yet? No. Okay, so it's not Sikkim, it's Lesser Sikkim, which is procced by that new Grandmaster trait that they put in to Beast Mastery. And I know of at least 4 bugs. I know of 4 ways to break it, and I do not know that they have fixed any of them. I don't see anything on that in these notes. Thief changes. Thief damage reductions are largely targeted at weapon skills so that they're kept at comparable power levels. Antiquary's artifacts are also being reduced so that the damage variance between them is made more manageable. Death Blossom, Unload, Weakening Whirl, Falling Spider, Vampiric Slash, Distracting Throw, and Shattering Assault are getting PvE damage nerfs. That means we're going to see a very, very rare thing. PP Unload, everybody's favorite lazy build, is getting a nerf. It's probably still going to be fine, like considering how much damage it does for no buttons. It's probably still going to be fine, but PP Unload is getting a nerf. Ashen Assault, reduce the power coefficient from 0.4 to 0.3 in PvE. Reduce the bleeding duration from 5 to 4 seconds in PvE. Reduce the poison duration from 5 to 4 seconds in PvE. Damaging conditions are now applied across all hits instead of the final strike. Vuln is now applied on the final strike instead of across all hits. And this same thing is happening with Malicious Ashen Assault. And my honest feedback on this one is I couldn't tell if this was a buff or a nerf. So you guys can tell me. I marked it in yellow for my own notes because I did not know enough about this to do anything other than read it to you. Entangling Asp, Double Tap, 3-round Burst, Heartseeker, Twilight Combo, and Venomous Volley are all getting PvE nerfs in various ways, mostly just to their damage numbers. Daredevil, Lotus Training, is getting a PvE nerf. Deadeye, Deadeye's Mark, is getting a PvE nerf. Spectre, Grasping Shadows, Eternal Night, and Well of Sorrow are getting PvE nerfs. Antiquary is getting deleted. Warrior, no, I freaking wish. Antiquary, Metal Legion Guitar, Summon Cryptus Turret, Mistburn Mortar, Hollow Dancer Decoy, Stone Summit Cannon, and Exhilarating Ephemera are getting PvE nerfs. Combat High is getting a PvE buff. And Warrior. Like the other professions, Warrior is receiving damage reductions in PvE. There are additionally some small adjustments to Hammer and the Berserker Elite spec in competitive modes to encourage their use. Berserker's Power and Leg Specialists are getting PvE nerfs. Fierce Blow is getting more damage in PvP and World v World. Berserker Rupturing Smash is getting a buff in PvP and World v World. Blood Reaction is getting a PvE nerf. Fatal Frenzy, reduce the Condi damage from 300 to 150 in PvE, but increase the power from 150 to 300 in World v World. So, nerf in one game mode, buff in the other one. Bloody Roar is getting a PvE nerf. Spellbreaker, Pure Strike is getting a PvE nerf. Paragon, Strengthening Stanzas, and Brisk Pacing are getting PvE nerfs. And that's the end of the document. Okay, so just to double check to see if they've updated anything else since they posted this, because this is where I got all of this from. And no, it looks like there was no additional updates. It's all just comment section stuff. So once again, I apologize for glossing over these, but my voice has a time limit right now, and I am trying to deal with that. So hopefully that was enough for those of you who listen to me on the drive home. If you want more details, I once again will have the full patch notes that are linked underneath this video. So if I mentioned, oh, Death Blossom is getting nerfed, and you want to know exactly how, just go to the link, go to Thief. It's right there. They're all right here. So if you want any of that, or I'm sure some of the other wonderful content creators will cover these with more in depth than I'm currently able to do. But that is the patch notes that are expected on April 14th. Well, what we know so far. This is a preview. And typically when they do a preview, we'll get more notes later on that'll be on top of these. I will say once again, my personal opinion, and again, I don't work for ArenaNet, it's just my opinion, is that the game does need nerfs across the board. We're all too strong for most of the content right now. And keep in mind, if they nerf the people at the top by 20%, that's not going to nerf everybody by 20%, because a lot of the other people weren't playing to the max of their potential anyway. If they nerf the top guy by 20%, the average player might only feel affected by like 10% of that, stuff like that. So it just depends on what's going on. So I do believe that they need to do these nerfs. I cannot say for certain if this is the best way to go about it. And I won't pretend like, this is needed and you need to love it. No, I don't know that. I do not know. There might be a glaring hole here. Like, it might be that, like, after all of this, they do something wrong and all of a sudden Core Guardian is at the top of the totem pole. And we're like, what? I don't know. There's so much freedom with build diversity in Guild Wars 2 that it's very easy for weird stuff to slip through the cracks because there's so many players. By God, we'll find a way. But I could tell you guys now, like, with things like Luminary one-shotting everybody in PvP and stuff like that, I have been playing a lot less PvP. I am glad to see some of these things getting tackled. I hope, as someone who's not an expert on Luminary, that they're doing it in a good way. I don't want any of these classes to be killed, but I would like them all tamped down. But that's just my opinion. So we will see if this gives the game what the game needs. I do really like that they address the one thing that was a glaring issue in my mind when I first read these notes, is this right here. We will keep a close eye on how these changes impact some of the most challenging PvE encounters. Because as I said, like, for example, if you do Gorseval, for those who don't know, it's a Heart of Thorns raid boss. If you see the gliding phase today, your group will say you're bad. Because people are used to not seeing that anymore. They're used to doing so much damage, you burn him past the point where you ever have to see that. Like, you just skip from phase 2 to phase 4. So with these changes, I don't know if they're trying to make it to where we see all these phases again, but if they do that, then some of the newer content, such as Ceres and Harvest Temple challenge modes, may become impossible, and then they will have to treat those on a case-by-case basis. So hopefully, that they handle that well. Because there's some things like Greer. I know a lot of people have been struggling with the Greer raid boss ever since he got his timer, and I know many people just skip it these days. Some still do it, but I know a lot of people find frustration in that. Hopefully, they handle this in a good way. But I think that's all that I have to say about this. My own builds, like as someone who frequently plays support druid in PvE, this isn't going to affect that at all. As someone who likes playing DPS Untamed in PvE, my damage will go down maybe from like 30k to 27 or something, mainly because of that big nerf to the pet damage, stuff like that. So that is not even enough for me to change the build I'm playing. I think most of you, if there's a build you love playing and it gets a slight damage nerf from this, you probably won't even have to change your build. You'll probably just be like, oh, that's how it is. But, if you wanted to, you certainly could. But that's my thoughts on the matter. As always, links are down below. And if you got any questions, problems, thoughts, concerns, or anything I miss, put them in the comment section down below, and I'll fight you there.